most of you are friends of the MDP or students, even better. And but I'd like to give you a little bit of background about what we are doing and what we are expecting. The MDP is now 6 years old, which is difficult to, at least for me, to almost to think about. And it's a program that has about 50 to 60 students. It's a 2 years program that really actually prepared professionals for economic, to do work in economic development. Our philosophy is that the first year we develop some extra, we provide the foundation in terms of economics, public policy, community development, public health, natural resources. We basically provide common background that allow you later on to specialize where you want to be. And between the first year and the second year, people had an internship in a development organization or any place around the world. So up to now, the best news for us is that our students found jobs. And to some extent, when you start a program like this, it's a huge gamble. And if it's a huge gamble and you don't pay for the gamble, the student pay for the gamble. So, but fortunately, the student got jobs. I believe there is a demand for the student, and I think that the program become better over time, and we're really, really proud of it. The thing that is really unique and interesting about the program that it covers a large range of issues that at least I couldn't foresee when we started. It's we always people that look at development from an academic perspective, think about it from a planning, rational behavior, but the reality is that there are a lot of much more interesting issues of human rights, issues of morality, issues of ability to cope with tough situations, issues of diplomacy, and these issues enter to the MDP all the time. And in this regard, I think that what we do is unique, and I'm really very happy that Molly is here because she will basically enlighten us on areas that we don't know a lot about, but we should know, and it's very important. And the issue of human rights is not only relevant to faraway places, it's also relevant to America. I think that now we are in a period of time that we realize that we cannot take freedom and equality and fairness and all these other values for granted. We have to fight for them every day. And in this regard, again, this type of lecture is important for us. So I would like to introduce George Scharfenberger, who is the director of our program and has done an incredible job running it. We have a fantastic staff with Lauren and Chris, and we have great students. So thank you for coming and welcome. Now go.
Thank you, David. It's a very kind introduction. And David, really, more than anything else, thank you for the inspiration and your leadership that made this program get off the ground and has kept it vital for these 6 years. And we're expecting at least for another 6 or 16. Thank you. That was a yes, I think. All right. As David said, it's my honor to serve as the program director for the Master of Development Practice program here at UC Berkeley. And it really is an honor to be associated with this fantastic program. It's an honor to be associated with this wonderful institution, UC Berkeley, to be associated with the fantastic executive committee of faculty from across campus that support us in this. I'm incredibly lucky to have a staff and faculty who support the program through thick and through thin, and sometimes it's thicker than thin. But more than anything else, it's my privilege to have had the opportunity to play perhaps a small role and to be associated with 139 young people who either are or have been students of the MDP. they're what this is really all about. They come from over 20 countries and a dizzying diversity of backgrounds. But as diverse as they have one thing, or actually two things in common. One, absolutely clarity on the crying and desperate need to now get going and make a difference, and in their engagement to be part of that difference. So I'd like us all to take a chance, take the opportunity to recognize and congratulate and thank those students and alumni who are here tonight. So please stand. So what is this all about tonight? Well, twice a year, the MDP highlights thought leaders in this broad and ever-changing field of development practice. We're still trying to figure out what that is. We, once a year, use the opportunity to highlight the work of effective faculty on campus, engaged scholars. We've had talks from Vince Resch, from Michael Watts, from Ted Miguel, from Alain Degendry and Dan Kamen. But we've also managed to go outside Sather Gate and bring in other exceedingly interesting voices and provocative people. We've had philosopher Martha Nussbaum, former USAID director and now president of the Rockefeller Foundation, Raj Shah, and Pulitzer Prize winner, Jared Diamond. But last year, we took a slightly different tact. We thought we'd invite someone to recognize whose experience was perhaps not as much in the limelight as those other luminaries. We thought that we'd bring in someone who was actually a practitioner in the field and who spoke from that space of practice. Judith D'Souza was an Indian social worker and activist. She talked about how she rose in varying responsibilities from her hometown in Calcutta to other places, and ultimately ended up on the front lines of supporting women's groups in Afghanistan. It was there that she was kidnapped and held prisoner for 40 days before finally being released. Judith's story was a story that she related to us, was a story of engagement, a story of strength, a story of solidarity, of persistence, of resilience, and ultimately of forgiveness. In addition to the skills we provide our students, in addition to the knowledge we give them, it's our hope that some of those more qualitative aspects can also be developed, and we see that happening every day. But this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce another remarkable woman whose own story of engagement and solidarity and persistence and resilience I've had the pleasure to know for 40 years. Molly and I first met in Senegal. I was a young staff member of the Peace Corps. She was a young researcher at the University of Dakar. Our paths crossed, etc. No. That's not what it says. Anyway, but there's a lot that I could say, but I'll let Molly tell her own story. The story of her story, but also the story of Tostan, this remarkable organization that she founded in 1991. Hopefully she'll also share with us a bit of her personal journey as well. And for those interested in learning more about Molly and the fantastic work of Tostan, I highly recommend the book. This is a book written by Amy Malloy, which chronicles Molly and her journey. It's called However Long the Night. It's available, I understand, Barnes & Noble. There we go. Sold out. There we go. Anyway, Molly asked that perhaps the best way to start this would be to show a brief video that documents some of Tostan's work. So maybe we can turn the lights down and we'll play that. Maybe not. Hold on. I see it. But you can't.
o wattu hono mbanomi somi noddi kamɓe kalni kam ɗum tawa mi ƴeñƴiro dow helle ɓernde am nde metta ha jarna kam bonno mi huɗɗo bonɗo ɗon ɗo ɓe gonɗo mi wona mi kita mi waɗa sara nde ɓiyi pourquoi calimi sabuna hande a heɓani ma 18 ans a heɓani ma duuɓi sappo e jeetati ane duuɓi sappo e tati ɓe mbuɗɗinama école ɓe gokkama gorko ma faalaka ɗon tan on suka debbo wawi bon wona faalaka on looɓa haro bon
sabu ko jangguinami ko ha nangumi ɓiɗɗo am o sehel mbasmi mbo jabde mbo okkire law dukkinimi ayiba o ƴattede nde ha tolniɗo
tunne golle muusi mba deltude
mino waɗi aada par ce que mawɓe am ɓe gandano ho aada o e wodina ɗeni caɗele comiɗe par ce que ko ɗum ɓe mbaɗiri kam aada o min noon gila nayi mi waɗa aada o mi yahoyi ari ha mi woni e dewgal mi yi caɗele ɗe kawranmi hen ɗe surtout e sengo jibingol eya mina hawra hen e caɗele mawɗe te noon mi ñagaki sukaɓe am ɓe mi waɗoya umen ko wayi noon
ɗon gokkirama ha a unat a defat a fitta ƴogat wiye gona reedu rek ɗum ko probléme ji addara par ce que ta ana toƴƴi ɓandu ma ndu ƴoƴanto
law kaddungo wonno joni ɗum ala dole forcé gonno law ɗum joni ala
tosan wawi waylude gurdam rendoji par ce que no ɓe jaadirta e neɗɗo ni ko ɗum addante ɗumen par ce que kabir min janggi jojjanɗi aade ɗi mi faami hoko woni hen min faami hoko woni nafoore jojjanɗi aade min gueti waylude saare amen nde fof no wayloyno
gonga kana woni no wattuni oɗo wattu e sansi ɓaɗa si réunion waɗinam min mbiyana mi jahata wiye min jara rewɓe tawaka e réunion ɓe worɓe tan noddere walla onon ko sukaɓe gonno on tawaka e réunion ɗum noon joni iwi joni so réunion waɗi ham min garat min keɗo minen kala min keeɓa hen komin kaali worɓe jiiɗi oɗo programme ɓe gandi programme o ko ballal ardi walli rewɓe walli worɓe ɓe
ɗi waɗano sensibilisé tawno minen ɓimen guiwino e nde cae min gokkirano
cugal del haddorako e ɗala ɓiɗɗo ma debbo o mbo jangga ha mbo heɓana hen hoore mum diplôme mbo heɓa ko wurdoyi ñande janggo
faala continde jande am ni ha mi heɓa bac am mo mi waɗa formation mi heɓa ligge nafa yimɓe ɓe e leydi ni mi heɓa ɗo mi dari
no faala wonde ministre walla mi wona jangguinoyo comme ça wona coordinateur walla superviseur ɗum fi mino yiiɗi wonde
ɗi ngala poste santé ɗum addi min manimi gommi on domaine si mi heɓoy janggo ha mi wona ɗum ta amen ɓe jaari on côté ta amen ɗin ɗum darani ɗum
mino weltani ɓiɗɗo am debbo o mbadi museki fawaki e cukalo ndi on ɗum pi men dalinanugol cukalo ndi on dewle forcé maroyigol ɗo fotani ɗum pi men dali ɗum sababu nde tossal miɗen jiiɗi tossal ko watta koye welani amen
mi haalna ɗumen no ɓe ɓeydu programme o sabu programme o ko programme moƴƴuɗo no ɓe ɓeydu programme o ha yimɓe ɓe ɓuura famde ko paami ko
right, please join me. Please join me in welcoming Molly Melching.
Was that the etc.? Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out on a rainy night. It's so nice to meet all of you, and I'm honored to be here with you at Berkeley. Thank you for the invitation. As many of you may already know, I have lived and worked in Senegal now since 1974, so for 43 years. I came as a student at the university, as George said, and I stayed on and on and on, and really never wanted to leave. I loved Senegal from the moment I arrived. I loved the people, their friendliness, their generosity, their wonderful sense of humor, and also their ability to deal with the most difficult situations with such great patience and optimism, despite all the extremely difficult situations they were in and the limited resources. And if ever I complained about anything, they would say to me an African proverb, which I love, which is, Mary Munding, doch bugao akogen. It's better to walk fast than to stand and yell at the forest. My arrival in Senegal corresponded to a very exciting time in Senegal. It was only 14 years after independence in 1960 in Senegal. And there was great intellectual fervor among Senegalese people who were seeking a way forward after colonization by the French. And by 1974, there were also a lot of development workers coming into Senegal because they had their own ideas about the ways forward for Senegal. And since I was fluent in both French and Wolof, they would hire me to do translations for them as they went around and visited various projects throughout the country. And they visited projects which they had, as you can imagine, thought about in Paris or in Washington, D.C., and that they thought were needed throughout the country. So I learned a lot on those visits. I was actually disturbed to often discover literally a cemetery of projects as I went around looking at the different development schemes that had been put in place in the villages. There were, of course, very well-intentioned projects for wells and health centers. There were income-generating activities. There were millet machines, pumps that had been brought in large numbers, but now had all too often fallen into disrepair after only several months. Often also, after the outside project innovators or those who had come in to manage the project when they left, then they were not working any longer also. It was particularly disheartening to me to see that the people were blamed for this lack of success in these projects. And even worse, I found that the women blamed themselves. It reminded me of another African proverb, which I love. Su fuki de gas, fuki de sul, pundai bari wante pah duam. If 10 are digging up and 10 others are filling in, there's lots of dust, but there's no hole. I realized that many of the efforts being made were done for the people without first taking time to really listen and to coordinate with them and without having a deep understanding of the goals and priorities of the communities. But most important, the values of the communities and their deeper values. So there was all this activity going on, lots of dust, but in the end, not the sustainable change that everyone had expected. So when I ended up after 8 years, I won't go into those 8 years. I did a lot of different things, mainly had a children's center. I started the first radio program in national languages in Senegal and went all over Senegal to record children's songs and stories and activities. But after leaving the children's center in 1982, I went to live in a rural village, the village of Sam and Jai. I only went for 4 months, but ended up staying there 3 years. And it was a village that had no electricity, no water, no schools, no health center, just numerous challenges. And because I had seen so much when I had been traveling around Senegal and looking at the different problems that I encountered, I decided that the first thing that our small team that went out to that village I was with a cultural specialist, Bole, and an artist. Again, we were only to stay for 4 months. We ended up really working and listening, first of all, listening to the people to find out what they wanted to learn, what was a priority for them. And they asked us at that time to help them to learn more, that they needed more information and more skills. And we also talked about their deeper values, the feelings they had that others were not taking into account certain things that were deeply important to them, values such as jam, peace, mbok, mbolo, jom, munya, and yar. Those are all very important words in Wolof, very difficult to translate into English, but which I can loosely translate as meaning peace, well-being, the extended family, unity, patience, and respect for one another. It was important that as I and my small team partnered with this community of Samanjai, that we constantly refer to these values in every type of activity that we carried out. But before we embarked on any development activities, villagers told us that they really did need more information and they needed more skills, as they had never been to school. No one in the community had been to school. And in the 36 villages that constituted the rural community where we lived, there was only one Catholic school that most of them would not go to as they were Muslim. And it was far away, they didn't send their children there. And so together with the villagers, we created an education program for them in their own language. Not, and I emphasize that, not in French. The language that was at that time used in formal schools. So we started and we took into account their own rich life experiences. We studied the ways that particularly women learned what they already knew and did well. We included subjects that they said interested them the most, such as health, the environment, along with the skills that they would need to help them successfully implement all their future projects. Skills of reading, writing, math, project management. We taught how to do a feasibility study before starting a project, how to do budgets. Again, I emphasize again, all in Wolof. That was the language they spoke there. And so this turned out to be the very first iteration of what is known as the Tosan Community Empowerment Program, which the people in the film referred to in this film. They were in this program for 3 years. And this was then initially developed in collaboration with these wonderful villagers from Samanjai. And the goal was to create a model of working with communities in which they themselves were at the center of their development, that started with them identifying their vision, and again, important, their values for the future, as well as their goals and priorities, as well as providing the knowledge and skills that they needed to learn to lead and sustain their own development. So this program turned out to be successful. We were happy, and suddenly people started taking an interest in our program, and our materials and approach were in demand with organizations such as UNICEF. I met with them in '88, and they were so excited. I remember the representative at that time had just come from Ghana, and he said, all our projects are failing, all the projects we did, and it's just the communities were not prepared to really manage and lead them, so that when we left, I just witnessed them all falling apart. And so this is a community preparation for other development activities. So we started out with UNICEF in 1988 as consultants. In 1991, as George said, I founded Tosan because we had to have an organization. The last thing I had ever thought of was being the director of an organization, quite frankly. In fact, I had never been in an organization before but I felt like it was important because we were getting funds and we had a team, and we were being asked to go literally in that next year to 100 villages in different areas of Senegal. So we implemented the program, and it continued to go well, and people continued to take an interest in our program. But after 7 years, something extraordinary happened to us. After 7 years, the women said, we want to learn about our own health. And we started to do participatory research on that. We said, okay, let's listen to the women. This is what is interesting to them. And listening to them, we found that by implementing a new program, a new module on women's health, a bit of a revolution took place. Because while we did this participatory research on women's health, we realized that just giving women information on their health in the village was not going to change some of the deeper problems that they faced. Just to give you an example, they talked to us about female genital cutting. They talked to us about child marriage. They talked to us about problems they had with health around violence against girls and women. And we realized that these were such deeply entrenched practices that it would take more than just information to make these deeper changes in things that were seeming to really hinder their well-being. Any deviance, for example, to female genital cutting at that time would have been severely sanctioned by the rest of their family and the extended social network. So given all that, we thought a lot about what are we going to do about doing, they want this module on health, we can give them the information, but we know it's not enough. So I, coming from Illinois, going to the University of Illinois, had never learned anything about human rights, okay? I knew nothing about human rights when I went to Senegal. But I talked this over with a Senegalese lawyer who then ended up being the Minister of Justice. He's now Minister of Foreign Affairs. He gave me the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a very fancy document that I could put on my walls, actually, and I said, wow. He said, this will help you with the villagers. I said, really? I read these very official-looking documents that he gave me, full of complex legal jargon, and I thought, how can these articles really bring about what I thought was needed, a deep and meaningful change in their lives? So, at that time, we had a little team. I was the only American in our organization at that time. And we had a team of very dedicated women, and strangely enough, it just so happened they had all been through female genital cutting and had insisted that we include that in our women's health module. And so we sat down and we really tried to imagine in very simple terms what some of these human rights articles actually could mean to women living in these remote and resource-poor communities. And together, we came up with some very simple principles. Like, everyone has the right to be free from all forms of discrimination. Everyone has the human right to voice their opinion in public. Everyone has the right to education. Everyone has the right to be free from all forms of violence. Everyone has the right to work and not be exploited in their workplace. Everyone has the right to vote, and they have the right to be elected, even women. And we soon found out that these seemingly simple principles, human rights that were enshrined in more complex and they were more difficult to understand in these articles, in these international instruments. But what we found is they were touching upon what I call the hidden heart of human rights. They were more powerful and life-changing than we could ever have imagined. We used drawings and role play and theater in the educational sessions to help the participants, again, especially women, to better envision how these human rights principles could be used and then applied in their everyday life. We helped women practice and especially rehearse how to calmly, but very firmly and with confidence, advocate for these new human rights to their male relatives, to local authorities, and we made sure they noted, the men, that these were not just women's rights, but also men's and children's rights as well, and that they all had responsibilities that were associated with each of the human rights. When we implemented this new module, we were totally taken by surprise at what happened next. Women started speaking up for the first time at community meetings, taking on leadership roles with confidence, organizing to improve healthcare in the communities, building makeshift schools, and advocating with local authorities for teachers to ensure their children could benefit from the right to health and education. They ran for office to better promote a human rights agenda at the local level, ending violence against women and children by respectfully educating and convincing all community members that these abusive practices would no longer be acceptable in their community. Not only did the women themselves decide to end female genital cutting and child marriage, much to Tosan's great surprise, we never said in our sessions, you should end this practice, this is a horrible practice. We simply gave them the human rights information, and we gave them the health information. We gave them the religious information, that this was not a religious obligation, to discuss and deliberate within the class. But they learned this, and they decided to abandon the practice, and then they provided Tostan with very innovative strategies for making these decisions possible and sustainable, using methods that would align with their deeper values. It was Demba Jawara, Imam Demba Jawara, he was an imam and village chief, who had never been to formal school, who taught Tostan that real change can only come about not through the behavior change of one person or one village or just even one area. It really involved the extended family, often living in far-off communities, even across borders, if it was necessary to reach them and to include them into important decisions such as these. So Demba, who is now 83 years old, has been with his relatives, a small team of his relatives, has been to 347 communities. He has indeed counted them all. He has recorded them. He learned to read and write at 60 years old in the Tostan program. And he's very proud to show you his 347 villages that he visited. To talk about why FGC and child marriage are not practices that will help the community to achieve their deeper values of health, of peace, and of well-being. And following in the brave footsteps of Demba, and thanks to the outreach efforts of hundreds of other religious and traditional leaders, as well as many of the women participants, I would say many who had lost children, girls, to the practice, to date, 8,426 communities in 8 African countries where Tostan has worked have united through public declaration to announce their intention to end these harmful practices. One such traditional leader and human rights activist from the southern region of Senegal, from Kolda, where these women that you saw in the video were from, her name is Binta Diaw. She represents the many women who have made significant changes and contributions, such as these, to her family and community. Binta underwent cutting at puberty, and then at 14, she was pulled out of school by her parents to marry an older relative. She immediately became pregnant, but her first child was stillborn. She was too underdeveloped. Her body was too underdeveloped to have a child at that age. And also, she never went for a prenatal consultation, and not understanding how important that was, particularly for a 14-year-old girl. She became pregnant immediately afterwards, but her second child also died, this time from tetanus, 3 weeks after the birth of the second child, because she did not know the importance of vaccination during her pregnancy. So it was after that Binta joined a Tostan class that had been opened in the community. Binta said that the turning point in her life came when she learned about human rights and responsibilities. She told me that it was through the human rights sessions that her life changed, and she realized something that she had never known before, never realized before, and that is that she had choices. That her daughters and other girls did not have to undergo harmful practices like FGC and child marriage. That they had the potential to end the violence that many of them had undergone without questioning or even dreaming of trying to end on their own. Binta realized through her human rights education that it is possible to remake the rules when they don't lead to health and well-being, and to engage others in joining a positive movement. This was not a blame and shame movement. This is not a, oh, you know, you bad people, this, etc. It was like, oh, we've learned something new that we didn't know, and we're moving forward towards well-being and health and a better life for our community. And so it was fairly easy for them to incite other people to join this positive movement through information sharing and what we call a process of values deliberation. Binta became a Tostan community facilitator and eventually led her own community and 17 other communities to collectively decide as a unified extended family to abandon the practices of female genital cutting and child marriage through a public declaration held in the region of Kolda, where the prevalence for these practices was over 90%. Binta now hosts a radio program featuring knowledge on human rights and interviews with people in Kolda communities who are working to realize those human rights for girls, women, and men. Binta's story reminds me of what Eleanor Roosevelt once so famously said, "Where, after all, do human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on a map, on any maps of the world. Unless these rights have meaning there, they cannot have meaning anywhere." So I want to leave you tonight with this thought. Since Eleanor Roosevelt wrote these words, the world has made significant progress in creating new and more specific human rights instruments, in advancing frameworks and crafting laws for application of human rights around the globe. These are the tools of human rights and justice, now available to everyone. Yet the millions of people in our world who could most benefit from knowing and claiming that other side, that deep and too often hidden heart of human rights, still do not have access to them, don't have the possibility to think about them with their community and extended social network, and to apply them in their everyday lives. Working to see the spread of human rights and development in all of the small places of our world won't begin with the SDGs, or funders, or with complicated legal frameworks, or with high-level conferences. It will begin in the small places. It will begin with all of you here tonight, with your commitment each day to begin small and scale wisely and patiently, to use the best problem-solving tools ever created, listening, empathy, and understanding, to see people not as examples of the problem or victims, but to build on and understand their values, their perspectives, their fuller potential, their aspirations. For me, this is the challenge and the opportunity all of us here tonight have in this 21st century, to focus our attention on the hidden heart of human rights, to explore how and in what ways we can ensure that millions more at the local level can experience the blossoming of human rights knowledge and action in those small places at the local level, innovating new tools to measure and give shape to how development can truly succeed on a large scale and become something driven from the inside out rather than imposed from the outside in. Thank you very much. I've got my gun over here. Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for some questions. If you have some questions, I'll start with a couple, and some of the Students will pick them up on the side aisles. So Molly, thank you. That was very inspirational. I think a lot of the themes struck what we ponder and seek solutions for in our program and in others. How do you get the word out? I mean, how do you expand this? How do you share what you're doing with others, just so those small little islands can fill the ocean?
Okay, yeah, you can all hear me. I think we first thought that we would do it by going to other countries, and so we went all the way to Somalia and Djibouti, where we had similar results, by the way. But it was very difficult for us to move our offices to Somaliland, and with all the problems and the conflict it was so far away, and without the really resources, we're not that big an organization. So we're now focusing mostly on West Africa, but what we have done is to start a training center and a training program that lasts for 10 days, where we've had now, since March 2015, we've received 303 NGO leaders from 38 different countries, not just Africa, but we've had participants from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Haiti, because we found that our content, our participatory methodology, what we call organized diffusion, with people reaching out, the people themselves reaching out to share, that it really resonates with the others who come, and we find them being able to take some of the strategies and the human rights approach particularly, to adapt that to their own programs. So this is now how we've started, and we've gotten really good feedback, such that now we were going to only do 2 a year. We're at 10 this year. Just finished a training with people from Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Somaliland. And they said, I just got an email from them today, and they said, you started the spark, and we are on fire. It was like, wow. So I think it's not the whole program, but at least it's trying to share. The trouble is they now want the whole program. I don't know how to do that, so if people have any ideas, I would be very happy to hear your ideas about how you share a 3-year education program with so many other countries that have expressed an interest in the model.
All right.
You should be able to figure that out.
Okay, we'll take that as one of the MDP challenges for next year.
Yeah.
You've obviously moved along. It's been organic progress. Mm-hmm. Clearly, you've learned as you've gone. But my guess is you've probably made a couple of mistakes along the way.
No.
What has gone wrong, and what have you learned from that?
Yeah, I always say we pretty much have made every mistake that's possible to make. And that's why things are going well now. So I would encourage everybody not to be afraid of making mistakes. I feel like when you're going through them, of course, you feel like you're not going to make it through. I've had really some very difficult moments in the 27 years that I was CEO of Tostan. I'm no longer CEO, by the way. I decided to transition and we have a wonderful new CEO now. But I'm still at Tostan. I'm the creative director, the founder and creative director, which I like a lot. And I'm still doing the trainings and programs. But I think one of the biggest mistakes we made in regards to human rights was that we started we were doing women's health. So we said, okay, we'll do women's rights. Well, you can imagine can you imagine what problem we had with doing just women's rights? The men became so suspicious and so upset, what about our rights and what is this? And so they even closed some centers, and it created quite a few problems. And we said, well, this is not really our fault. When we sat down and thought about it, why are we doing just women's rights? So this was in 1996, and so in 1997 and 1998, when the women started really doing amazing activities, we sat down and we said, in 2000, let's redo our program, and let's talk about human rights. Let's talk about men, women, and children's rights at the same time, so that we let the men know, you're involved in this. And this is not about ending violence just against women, but if you are victims of violence, we will stand up and march for you, and which is what the women started doing. They started doing marches and all kinds of activities to end violence in their communities. And it was just, it was a turning point because the men suddenly became engaged. And when they became engaged, we realized how important it was. The other mistake, too, was not including religious leaders enough. So we now do 10-day trainings for religious leaders. And we work with the Carter Center. When Jimmy Carter realized what we were doing, he believes that to end abuses against girls and women, he said, and when he was 88, he said, I am devoting the rest of my life to ending abuses against girls and women through religion. He believes that it's the religious leaders who can really make a difference. And so they started sending us their partner religious organizations from Nigeria and Ghana. And so we did religious leader training for them. And when we are aligning the Quran with human rights principles and doing the whole visioning and the approaches that are very respectful, and they really have responded to that, and they have done amazing things. I was just at the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, and one of the religious leaders from Nigeria was there, and he said, he's the director of the Islamic Institute in Lagos, and he said, I just met with 200 imams and 90 women leaders, and I told them, Islamic rights are human rights, and human rights are Islamic rights. And he said, I went in and I showed the verses from the Quran, and he said, we will no longer accept any abuse against girls and women because it is not in line with the values of our religion. And we were all go, wow. But I mean, it's been really amazing, the response of religious leaders. So we've done that one for Mali, of course, for Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, but many for Ghana and Nigeria, and Carter Center is having us do 3 more this summer for religious leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm not leading those. We have a religious rights expert, Islamic rights, who is the leader of those seminars.
Mm-hmm. There's a question, I guess, is somewhat related to that, and that's, people in power don't give it up easily. So you're really changing the power dynamics in the communities, primarily gender power. How did that come about?
Again, it was the human rights. It was strange how powerful that was. It was including the men, as I said, that was a mistake. But once they found themselves involved, once they felt respected, once they felt listened to, and that this was about, again, what is your vision for the future and your ultimate goals of health and well-being and peace, and everybody agreeing on that. It's like, how can we better achieve that, and how can we make sure that everyone is included, because they have to be included if we're going to achieve these goals. And it's amazing how much they support the women now. I mean, we've had hundreds of women in our program elected to office at the local level, at the district level, which is really exciting. That's our new module now that we're working on. We're doing decentralization. We're training the district councils on rights and responsibilities, on creating participatory budgets, and the community management committees that we start when we work in a community, so that they know what is the role and responsibility of that council from the village point of view. And it's like bridging a gap that existed before, because they're now advocating for their rights. And the women they've got this education that allows them to better defend the rights on the council, the district council, to speak out. They were on there before, but they never spoke out. But now they have the confidence to speak out. So I think that we have seen also that by telling people, for example, with the religious leaders, we say, you should be the leaders of this movement. And they say, oh, we can be the leaders of the movement? Okay. Then we're interested. It's great to see that they give sermons in the mosque on this, on human rights. They do it at baptisms and marriages. They're very active. It's hard. You have to all come and visit so that you can see for yourselves. They tell me the trainings, they say, can you come to Kenya and do this training? I said, no. You have to see it. They go to the villages. They visit the villages. They talk to the villagers. They ask the village leaders, how did you give up power? And that's when you know that this is real. It's very interesting.
Well, that raises a question about how this model moves from one place to another. I mean, is there a need for adaptation, or is it kind of the same thing? Does it seem to work equally everywhere?
When we went to Somaliland, we said to everybody, you feel free to adopt but human rights are universal. When you talk about human rights and you introduce it, you talk about being human. And we don't necessarily talk about articles and instruments, but more about what it means to have human dignity. And really, everywhere you go, it's the same. Human dignity is the same. You need to eat, you need food, you need shelter, you need clothes, you need to be loved, you need to be respected, you need to have a family. And they go through all this and they think about all this and how this is important for everyone. They don't see it as a Western imposed document or human rights instruments that coming down from the UN to be imposed on them. They think of more, and then another thing I've noticed too is that these really remote communities, it somehow links them to something greater. Like they feel linked to a more international community, like we're part of being human around the world. And it's like, this connects us all. It's what brings us together rather than what divides us. And I think that is very powerful also. So they didn't change much in Somaliland. They changed the drawings. In our human rights drawings, we had pictures of a church and a mosque, and they said, the church is bigger than the mosque. You have to change that drawing. So we did. We made them equal. We of course put the Somali dresses in the drawings and things like that. And of course, they had different examples, but in general, a lot of the examples that they gave were very similar. And we did a lot of work. We did a post-program module on peace and security. What we found were that the conflicts that we found in all the other countries, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Mali, and Mauritania, were very similar. Very similar in all those countries. And so we're dealing with processes. So they're very similar. Mm-hmm. And then the people themselves bring the content, whereas we bring a sort of framework that they can work through. And again, the most important thing is allowing for people to speak in the classroom and to speak up. One of the things that helped the women the most, we've had a lot of research done on our program, and I would encourage you to continue with your development research because we have benefited.
SIGA, I think, was one of the...
Yes. We started a program for literacy because we didn't have that many books in national language. We work in 22 national languages. Very, very important always that we do the program in national languages. And so we said, okay, what about SMS texting? So we actually are teaching literacy through SMS texting now. And they're learning to read and write also, but they particularly are focused on the SMS texting. It's a way to communicate they're very excited about this. And so they learn much faster. The evaluation that you did actually showed that the literacy rates greatly improved when we use this method. So now we're doing that in all of the classes where we are in all the countries. It's a method that we developed back about 6 years ago, and that is working in all the countries where we're doing the program.
Speaking of local languages, there is one question here about that. I mean, I guess summarizing a little bit, all your work is done in local languages. Uh-huh. So, for instance, in Senegal, it's not done in French, which is the national language. Does that create issues in
It's official language. Yeah.
They're all national languages, right? So there's not really a lingua franca. Is there some danger of this kind of keeping people apart rather than bringing them together? How do you see that? I mean, as it grows from the little islands to the broader sea.
The French has no meaning to people, quite frankly. They've not learned it. The kids go to school when they're 6 years old. They've never heard French. Imagine a child 6 years old walking into a classroom and not speaking a word of French and or English. We work in the Gambia also. And so the most important thing is the content of the program. And the content encourages people understanding, not discriminating, unifying, we work on in the discrimination sessions, people go deeply into some of the caste discriminations. They've encountered many of the types of discrimination and realize, that it's time to overcome those. And this is a program that unifies people, and we're very careful about that. There are some programs, for example, that will say, oh, if a girl is going to be cut, you should encourage her to run away and go to a safe house. If you do that, what happens? You're dividing the family, and the family is one of the essential values of African society. So what you're encouraging is a division of the family, and who's going to take care of that girl for the rest of her life if she's... it's harder because if you want to unify the whole extended family, they have to go far and wide, right? You know that. You lived in Senegal, but it crosses borders. Their families have no borders. They're in Mali, but they go there. And they talk to their relatives. And because they're trusted, and they're very proud because they have this information they never had before in their own language. They could never have done this in French. But I think everyone has the right to learn in their own language, to express themselves freely and fully in their own language. And then afterwards, it's easier to learn a second language. But the important thing, I think, is for women to have voice and be able to express their priorities and their ideas for the first time, which they could never have done if it were in a different language. Okay. I feel very strongly about national languages. I studied with a professor at University of Dakar. At the time was University of Dakar. It's now called Cheikh Anta Diop University, and I was lucky to study with Cheikh Anta Diop for 10 years before he died. And he was a very big believer in national languages being the way forward for all of Africa. People have the right to learn in their own language, particularly women who've never been to school or had to drop out because they were forced to marry at age 12. There's no way, if you started working with them in French, that they would be able to do what they're doing now. Manage projects. They have bank accounts. They're traveling. They went to India to learn at the Barefoot College. They've become solar engineers. They are doing amazing things. They're in Gambia. All of the women who were in our program are now in the National Bureau in Banjul, talking about platforms of human rights and health and education and rights to work for women and not be exploited. They would not have been able to do that in English.
All right. A couple of other questions, just kind of on operational challenges and need to make trade-offs along the way. I mean, how do you, clearly over the course of 20-some years, there's been a lot of back and forth. What have been the greatest challenges in implementation? Every
challenge you can have. We were funded for a long time by UNICEF, and although the people at UNICEF are fantastic that we worked with, the administration is such that they fund you for 1 year, and then you have to redo the protocol, and that can take 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And our program is 3 years, so you can imagine the challenge that creates when you're sitting there and waiting. So it was very difficult because we were funded by UNICEF in all these countries. We sort of were able to pre-fund before, but now this is no longer accepted because of their administrative requirements. But it made it very hard for us. And so we're looking at different ways. Like one of the things that we did that has been most successful is we said, look, we have a 3-year foundational program with this human rights approach that has results in 5 major areas: governance, education, health, environment, and economic empowerment. We get all these results. Instead of just going to a donor and saying, fund us for literacy or fund us for FGC, we have all these results, and we have 56 different indicators, and we agree on those, and we get investors in this program. So that this is how we funded our previous 150 villages in Mali, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Mauritania. And that worked really well. We got individuals, we had family foundations, and even UNICEF joined in as part of that, and that really worked. That was an exciting model, and one we're continuing, and we're doing that this year again in 150 new communities. And by the way, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is funding us to do the monitoring and evaluation. Because what we're trying to do is, I talk a lot about social norms. How do you measure social norms? And so we've come up with lots of really, I think, innovative ways to try to better understand when social norms are changing. And that has helped us a lot. We have now tablets, and so we have real-time information. We know what's going on in all the classes in all the countries. You know, that because we're receiving them on our server, we're getting the number of participants, what they're doing, what the community management committees are doing, the action plans, if they're having inter-village meetings to discuss, you know, new ideas or ending practices, things like that. And that has been really helpful to have their support in really systematizing our monitoring methods, which needed to be systematized.
Yeah.
And so that's been very helpful.
Yeah, there are actually a couple questions on monitoring. Could you give me an example of an indicator that you find particularly relevant?
Yeah, just to take, let's see, if you take FGC, instead of going to the, and one thing that has been really, was scary at first, because we used to monitor and evaluate our participants. But we claim that we have results in the community because of this outreach we do. The participants adopt another learner, and then the participants adopt the whole community, and then the communities adopt other communities. It's what we call organized diffusion, which leads to public declarations and consensus among the whole group. So then we were saying, okay, well, if we say we claim we have rights, we have results in the community, we need to be evaluating that. And I said, oh dear. But actually, we found that there really is, when you ask community members, so you might say, instead of saying, have you ended FGC, we say, what percentage of people in the community, how many people do you think are still practicing female genital cutting? And is it more than half, or is it less than half? Or, and we know that if they say, yes, we think that more than half of the community is still practicing FGC, we know that person is practicing too. Because it's an interdependent practice. It's not an individual practice. It really helps us to better understand what's really happening. And we say, well, what would other people think of you? Because we want them to also, if other people think they would disapprove, then we know they probably haven't ended also. So we saw, what we saw through these results was that the major changes came after the human rights module, quite frankly. That it had a huge impact. And we've known that, but it was great to have those results. But then they became higher after the end of the program. Even we at one point UNICEF said, "Oh, we're having results in 1 year, so let's just do 1 year." Then we had an evaluation, and the evaluation said, "No, people are just so highly motivated after they've gone through the human rights, the problem solving, the hygiene and health. They're ready to go on and do literacy, project management, and really." Complete their education to a point where they can lead their own development. And do not stop that, but that was hard. That's been the major challenge, really, is convincing people that a 3-year program is the minimum. I mean, how many years of education have you all had? And to think that, we expect people in rural African villages to do 3 months or 4 months, and then lead their own development. It's ridiculous. 3 years is a minimum. The new module we're doing, we have two. The new modules are the peace and security. The other really exciting module is reinforcement of parental practices. Working on social norms with female genital cutting helped us to understand when a social norm is in place. And social norms are in place. We always say there are 3 things. 1, it is an expected practice. 2, there are harsh sanctions when not followed, and positive sanctions when followed. And 3, it is a social value. So what we found is that parents were not cognitively stimulating their babies. And that was because, and this is all over West Africa, and we found this. They believe that showing too much favor to their little babies, 0 to 6, especially 0 to 3, will bring evil spirits. They will be jealous. This is what they believe. And if, I remember Penda, who works with us. Penda said, Molly, when, she's been to university, right? She said, when I had my baby, I sat and talked to my baby, how are you, and what did you do today? My mother-in-law came up and said, stop that, this is dangerous. That baby, if you keep talking to her, is going to turn around, and you can become crazy or you can die. She'll start talking back to you. And I said, Penda, what did you do? She said, I stopped talking to my baby. And it's just, they just didn't know, and we didn't know. I always tell people when we do these, we actually teach brain development in the classes now. So people understand that it's the first year that is the most important for a baby, for brain development. But, so for social norm change, we start with the information, but you can't stop there with just the people in the class. We then have the home visits where the whole family has to be there. We can't stop with that. They then reach out to the whole community, but you can't stop there. You have to reach the mother-in-laws who are in the other village. And you have to reach out to the whole extended network, because otherwise people will say, stop, don't do that, this is dangerous. And this is now that we know how to identify social norms, we know that the strategies you use have to be different than just normal practices, like that you want to change. Like, littering, it's not a social value. Nobody cares whether they say, we should stop littering, and we're learning information on germ transmission, and then people start picking up and cleaning up. But when a social norm is in place, you never go in and message. It's the worst thing you can do. Telling people, just stop what you're doing. You know that because we've had here. Just stop the drugs, or just stop smoking, or
just say no.
Just say no, yeah. But the messaging for social norms just doesn't work. So, you have a whole different approach, and that has really helped us in our educational models now.
All right, we're coming at time, but I just want to ask one question, because
Or does anybody else have a question?
Well,
I'd like to hear from the people.
But these came from...
I know, but I like to meet people and hear their questions themselves.
There's one, be careful, he's French though, so that's is an issue.
Laurent. It's fun to hear people also, Jay.
I have many questions. Thank you so much. This is really great. Now you put me on the spotlight, George. I don't even really know which one to pick. The first one that really came to my mind was, is all this in your book? Because there's some really great material here that I would love to learn more about. And everything from the social norms indicators to the way you reach out. Would love to just pick your brain a little further. But the second question that was coming to my mind throughout your conversation with George was specifically about whether you think this is something that can be replicated in developed, quote-unquote, countries like here.
Whether it could be replicated where?
In developed countries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To tell you the truth, I'm glad that we... because actually when I give talks everywhere, the first thing people ask me is, can we do this here in America? And if you noted, I ended my talk, I was really thinking about here when I wrote that. It's the local level. I wish that I had learned more about human rights in my educational program, and the principles of human rights and the meaning of that and what it means, and had those discussions in my classrooms. I think in America, it would change things greatly to have that kind of dialogue and values deliberation going on at the local level. I think it would have made things, it could make things change here also. I definitely think it could be applicable. We did this strangely. I hadn't planned on doing this, but we ended up with 22 American students over the 10 days in January. And we found that it was just the same thing with these 20-year-olds. The same reactions. It's hard to, it really made them think about a lot of things they hadn't really discussed before. I definitely think so. It's not all in the book. A lot of it is explained in the book in a very personal way, the way the Demba's story is in there. I wanted the book to be about them, and they said, oh no, this will never sell if it's not an American who sort of is part of this story. But I do think that Amy Malloy did a very good job of bringing the other people's stories out. However, there have been many articles written. There's a book out called Values, Deliberation, and Collective Action by Jerry Mackey, Diane Gillespie, and Ben Cislagi, who studied this, have studied and researched this program for years. Jerry Mackey has written a lot about social norm change. We do a lot of the theory in our trainings. We do the capacity to aspire, to motivate people, and then so they understand that they can go beyond the roles that have been assigned to them. It's very important. We spend a lot of time on that in the classes in the villages, that you can be more than you have been told you can be. And that is powerful. We organize everything around the theory of well-being, that every village has a different idea of well-being. So we ask them what their idea of well-being is. If I ask you that question right now, it would be very different from a village in Guriri. I'm sure. But it's important. Your ideas of well-being is how I will relate to you. And that is really, we talk about the theory of well-being. We do a lot on social norm change and theory of social norms. Is Alice here? Where's Alice? Is she gone? Alice was here, and she also just wrote an article where a lot of this on social norms is featured. And I can give those to George. The evaluations, our website, tostan.org. But so much is coming out now on social norms. And it's just, I feel like it's so important. I don't find that many other NGOs actually doing the outreach to the extended families and using that approach. And we're using a double approach now because we're working at the district level. So we're not only reaching out to extended family, but we're trying to get the people are now reaching out on the district level, because that way we'll have better information about what's really going on. It's very hard to have information at the regional level because it doesn't really tell you what's going on at the local level. This is the major problem we have with statistics and with the DHS studies and all of those studies. They're aggregated at the regional level. So if at the district level, we would be able to have more information. So it would be scaling on the district level and on the two levels, the family, extended family, the reference group, as we say in social norm theory, reference group, or the people who matter, getting them together. We're scaling on those two levels. And we're hoping that that will be even more powerful.
All right, I think given our time, we have we have a time limit for the room. So actually, rumor has it that Molly is going to be hanging out at 311 at noon tomorrow.
It's a quick question.
For informal conversations, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how did you convince the participants to take time out of their regular routines to join your program?
Our program is really fun, and if you come to the training, you'll see. You do a lot of dancing, creative stuff, poetry, theater, kind of wild stuff. In fact, it's like a lot of times you're going, what? It's like, but it's really fun, and it's like, as one participant said, she said, you know, when I come into this class, I take off my boo-boo of sutura, of discretion, and I become myself, and I can express myself, and it's like, it's liberating for the women to be, it doesn't start in the beginning, it's very slow. We do lots of activities, even in our trainings, to get people to bond more, to know each other on a personal level. We start with people from where you are. We don't go into just development and health information. It's a lot about who we are and what we want in life and what's important to us. And the classes become really meaningful. I mean, it changes everybody. It changed my life. It's changed. I mean, I feel so lucky to be involved in this whole movement. It's a movement that's going on. It's a movement, but it's the people themselves that are they're excited. They're reaching out, and the more they learn, the more they can reach out, and the more they want to learn. So we really don't have problems of dropouts so much in the class, unless there are a lot of baptisms and deaths and things that are unavoidable. But I think it's something they look forward to, really, because it is fun. They say it's our TV. It's our village TV.
All right. Well, listen, Molly, I think I speak for everyone here. A big thank you to you for a very stimulating conversation and presentation, and we look forward just hearing more, and I just want to personally thank you for all that you've done and all that you're doing.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
And as I said, Molly will be around tomorrow at around noon in 311 Wellman Hall, informal conversations. Please join us.